Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. Listen to some correctly cued Veruca Salt. You got one right.
I got one right. It's the end of the show.
Yeah, right here at the end. You pulled it out. You pulled victory from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah, if you want to call it that. I pulled something from her.
And from where did you pull that?
We're just focus on what you're talking about. We're not talking about me.
But enough about Tori and his mistakes. All right. This is Patrick Riggins. And you're listening to my show, The Patrick Riggins Show. Works out good that way. Found a show that was named after me. You don't know how hard that search was. Looked around and finally found a radio station running a Patrick Riggins show and thought, hey, my name's Patrick Riggins. That works out really well.
Well, luckily, there's an opening.
There's an opening. They didn't have a Patrick Riggins to host it. And we're here on, the best radio network around, the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. All right, this segment. What I want to do is kind of back off the gun control thing there and just give you a feel-good story here, something that we're always preaching about. Americans will help each other. Now, I read a story this week, and I wanted to share it because it demonstrates how things work when the government is not involved. Now, I talk a lot about reducing the size of government, getting it out of our lives, and the arguments I run up against are always the same. What will happen to the poor people without the government? There will be people starving and dying in the streets. To those illogical arguments, I always ask, what did we do before all these government programs? Bodies weren't piling up in the streets. Were there not any poor people before then? Now, of course they were. But there were churches and civic organizations and other groups that took care of the poor, the people who couldn't genuinely help themselves. And that's the important part. We as Americans don't like supporting lazy people. But people who are in real need, we don't mind helping. Now, the Chicago Sun-Times ran a story about a 19-year-old named Monty Johnson. Now, his father died when he was a baby. And if that wasn't enough, he was left an orphan when his mother died, along with 20 others. It was at a nightclub stampede in 2003 in Chicago. At the time of the incident, he and the other children affected by the tragedy were promised money from a college scholarship fund, which was set up by the Chicago public schools. Interestingly, though, Johnson and the others never received any money. Surprise. The teenager was able to enroll at South Carolina State University through a band scholarship, but he was later forced to drop out because he could no longer afford the tuition. You mean the government promised something but they didn't deliver? Boy, that's unheard of. Of course, now putting aside the fact that this was more than likely taxpayer money being promised, something that shouldn't be done in the first place. This clearly demonstrates, though, why you shouldn't be relying on government. But back to this story real quick. Mr. Johnson, he had been attending South Carolina State University, and it was on a music scholarship, but his money ran out, and he had to come back home to Chicago last August. Since then, he has been volunteering his time at his alma mater, and he's been helping students practice their music because he was a music major, actually a trumpet player. Fortunately for him, the Chicago Sun-Times had run a story about him. And what happened? Well, an anonymous person stepped up and donated $25,000 to his school tuition so he could return to the university there in South Carolina. The donor, who doesn't want to reveal his identity, or her identity, they won't state to Mr. Johnson, they promised more money if Johnson maintains his grades. Now, the paper had talked to the donor, but of course they're keeping his or her name anonymous. A quote from them said, though, "I grew up poor, and my father did everything so that he could send me to school." This donor also said, "People talk about inequality, but the greatest source of equality is a good education." Chicago Public Schools spokesman Robin Ziegler said Friday that attorneys for the young survivors of the nightclub victims, the ones that scholarship has been set aside, they've been contacted about their eligibility, and that some families have reached back to the school officials. The process to distribute the money has not started yet. Some of the children aren't yet old enough to be in college, and others have to prove they are enrolled to get the money. Monty Johnson, who attended the Chicago Public Schools, of course, as we said, he's still waiting on his check. However, when that day comes, instead of taking the money, in addition to the scholarship, the money put forth by the anonymous donor, what Johnson plans to do is donate that money from the Chicago Public Schools back to the scholarship fund so other needy students can benefit. His quote was, "Somebody gave to us, why not give back?" Right, he is. This is how it used to work before we had government hijacking our education system, along with just about everything else in this country. Americans are very giving people. They are very generous when it comes to helping people who actually need it. This results in the best use of the money given. This is why these arguments about people starving without government help and people not being educated, they're all lies. And both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, they're both responsible for this. Now, we've played this stuff before, and how much time do we have, Tori?
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Exactly.
I don't have time to run those through. But if you've listened to our past shows, you know what I'm talking about. We had some quotes, some clips from Marco Rubio talking about, hey, how he benefited from federal student loans and how he likes Medicare. And same thing with Paul Ryan also stating he's glad Medicare is there. And that's what I mean by both sides demonstrating that they're really not interested in getting government out of your lives. They're really interested in being in control of government in your lives, just like the liberals are. Both sides want to control your life, want to tell you what to do, want to be responsible for the purse strings. That's a really good way to control you, is if they control your money, the money you're getting, and make you dependent on them. But if you want to hear some of those clips, the same clips we played a couple of shows ago, you can go to our archives at youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show, youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Look back in the archives. You'll see some where we talk about Marco Rubio and Paul Ryan and some of the things they were talking about. Also, we're up on the end of the show here. If you want some information about the show, you can go to facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show, facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Be sure and hit the like button. If you want to email us and complain about Tori's lack of paying attention during the show.
What? What were you saying? I wasn't paying attention.
Exactly. What was that?
What was you saying?
You can you can email us at patrickrigginshow@gmail.com. You can also drop us a card or letter here via the station WNOX here on Kingston Pike in Knoxville, Tennessee.
It's raining again.
And it's raining again. Great. I get to get out in it and get behind all the people in the left lane.
Me too.
Join us next Sunday afternoon when once again we'll talk about freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. We'll bring Tori some coffee so he'll be on his game.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Happy Easter, everyone. This is Patrick Riggins, and we'll see you next Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Have a great week.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on The Patrick Riggins Show. Every Sunday from 2 to 3 p.m. Be there.